Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this 128th episode in Season 2 of Good Questions with Cameron Dole. Special guests on this episode include singer-songwriter Sterling Drake. We'll be talking about his current single Roll the Dice and his upcoming album. We'll also visit with the Long Island medium herself, Theresa Caputo, has the upcoming Theresa Caputo The Experience live tour that is ongoing. We'll also visit with Nashville Songwriting Hall of Fame member Kent Blazy. We'll talk about his latest album, Me and My Guitar. If you would, please take the time to subscribe, comment, leave some feedback, check out the shop, and of course, share with your friends. Now, I don't know if this is a real concern, but my first thought here was, wow, a lot of bees are about to get hit by cars. Well, a construction firm in Poland has invented flower-scented asphalt, and they're planning to start using it in new roads soon. Now, it's got essential oils mixed in that mask the smell of asphalt and make it smell like flowers instead. The point is to provide a more comfortable working environment for road workers who have to stand around smelling asphalt all day. We don't know exactly how strong the smell is once it dries, so maybe the finished roads won't smell any different. But at the very least, you might be driving down the highway someday, get a whiff of something nice, and realize there's just construction up ahead. Singer, songwriter, and Texas artist as well, among other things. In Nashville today, Sterling Drake on the line with us. And Sterling, good to see you, brother.
Well, great to see you too. Likewise.
Since it's the first chance we've had to kind of converse a little bit, tell our listeners just a little bit about where country music started for you in your life. Where was the country background?
Oh man, well that's a good one. I've been exposed to it most of my life, just about all my life, through my dad and through my granddad. I was born on a cattle farm, so country music kind of goes hand in hand there. But neither of them were particularly musicians, and I got into songwriting and playing music throughout my youth, and played all sorts of different music, rock and punk, and just whatever I could get my hands on, really. But it wasn't until I kind of realized what I enjoy, and country was kind of my flavor that I picked up. But yeah, for many reasons, I like the genre of music. It's more than just music. It's a expression of culture. So that's what I find very fascinating about authentic country music.
Yeah, you mentioned authentic country, and when I was playing the single before we come in, that is as close to authentic, pure country as it gets, isn't it, Sterling?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I try to be. I appreciate it. There's everybody's got their own idea on what country is or isn't. But I think it's got historical and cultural significance, and I think that's something I try to attach to. I'm a fan of history and the old stuff, so I think it's reflected in my music.
Now, was the voice and instrumentation, was that the early precursors, or did you actually get interested in the write early on?
Oh, writing was the first. I think being a musician was an application for my songwriting, if that makes any sense. A lot of people that aren't involved in music don't realize there's kind of there's a difference between songwriting and being a musician. There's kind of two different worlds. Some people are great musicians. They can play a guitar backwards and forwards, but they can't write a song, or vice versa. And songwriting, playing guitar and eventually singing became the inevitable way in which I could create songs. But along the way, enjoyed playing music. In a town like Nashville, where I am today, you don't just kind of walk in here and self-proclaim yourself a guitar player without really having something to back it up with. So
how crazy was the first time you went to Nashville? Was it anything like mine? I came in for CMA Fest. It had to have been like 9 years ago. And I was green, had no idea about Nashville. And so I go walking down Broadway, and you know how crazy it gets during CMA Fest. Walking down, and I hear this guy playing the guitar and singing like nothing I've ever heard before. And I thought, I wonder who this is I'm going to see. And I end up coming up, and it was just an alley with a guy with his guitar open, sitting there. And I'm just like, are you serious? They're singing in the alleys better than I've heard anywhere else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it never, there's never a dull moment in this town. I'm here just about half the year these days. I work on a ranch in Western Montana. But every time I come back, I just get shocked by being here. I remember the first time I went to the Grand Ole Opry. I got invited backstage. A buddy of mine was playing, and so I was hanging out. And I'm still just a young kid. I'm 26, and this was a couple of years ago. And just not only about an hour into being there, I got Tommy Emmanuel pulled me aside to come jam in his green room. Me and my buddy, and just him. And it's like, this is nuts. Like, you don't get used to it. At least I haven't yet. All the people you get to see on a daily basis. So it's crazy.
Now, as a songwriter, who are the songwriting influences? Who are the artists that inspired your writing abilities?
Oh, as a songwriter, and I appreciate the difference there because I get production inspiration from other people than my songwriting. But I'd say Roger Miller is a big influence to a degree. John Hartford, Ed Bruce, who wrote a lot of Willie and Waylon's outlaw tunes like Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys, all that stuff. It kind of run the gambit, but I think as my writing has developed, I've found some of these other characters such as Roger Miller that are just unbelievable songwriters. But as far as production, I've always been a fan of the classics like Ray Price and a lot of Texas dance hall style country too. And Bob Wills or Johnny Bush even, or anybody. There's a well of music you can tap into for influence if you're willing to dig through the catalog over the years. There's a lot out there.
There is a lot out there. Now, have you ever tried any of the scatting? You talk about being a Roger Miller fan. I mean, have you ever done any of the scatting?
No, Lord, no. You don't want to hear me do that. But what I do love about that is that he talks about some pretty serious topics in a song, but his comedic relief is an amazing utility. I think a lot of songwriters take themselves way too seriously, and they come across as so stoic, and it's almost not authentic. It doesn't translate well with their audience. Nobody is that stoic all the time. I'm not sitting on out somewhere in the middle of nowhere with my head in the wind, like writing a song. You're in an alleyway in Nashville when the song comes to you. You're somewhere. Man, it's just real. It's real. People have that sense of relief, and if he executes it through scatting and all that, it's genius. It's genius.
Now, roll the dice. Where did the inspiration for this single come from for you?
Oh, this one's pretty easy. I've got a bunch of other songs coming out I look forward to, and they kind of run the range of more songwriter based, or some of them being more just kind of emphasis on production value. But this was just an attempt at creating a good Western swing number. I'm a big fan of Cindy Walker and all these old songwriters from the 40s up until, recent times that wrote those traditional style, verbiage. And so it's kind of just a love song, or taking a chance on love. It's a basic song, but it's only got about one verse, but I really try to nail down that we do it right production wise, because a lot of people don't, that's something that's lacking right now. It's that you hear the radio and you kind of know what to expect. But if you heard a twin fiddles and a pedal steel, intro, you don't hear that much anymore. And I love that stuff, man. It's important. So this was really my attempt at trying to see if I can't garner some semblance of a younger audience that wants to hear that stuff too. I'm kind of trying to find out who wants to hear this first before I continue. I'm a new artist. This is my first single towards my first EP here. So
now, how hard is it with so many different variations of what country music is in Nashville? How hard is it to maybe convey the sound that you're trying to get to the producers, the production side of things as well?
Well, I've gotten laughed at and had some doors closed in my face for sure. As soon as somebody who's just used to the standard here on Music Row hears pedal steel or organic instrumentation or analog recording or something, they're just like, that's cute. That their brain just shuts off and thinks, oh, this is novelty. This is something you could throw in a box and throw away. And I just, it took a while to find people that were I have a great team. I've got a great manager now, and I've worked with some great people from Nashville and in Texas and abroad. But it's a big risk for them to work with me. Like these guys working with me is almost a statement. I'm not at all what they're doing on Music Row. I've worked as a writer down there, and it's almost an FU to some of these people down there that are trying to, kind of manufacture country music. And that's why we take it to Texas, man, because people, one, have a historical relevance to this music. Western swing is Texas, man. That's it. Like that's where it comes from. Cowboys come from Texas, and ranching comes from down there, and that's what the origin of everything I like is from Texas. So if there's ever a place that's bold enough to maybe try and do things a little different, it's maybe the radio guys down there in Texas. So, which brings me to you. Yeah.
Now, how has the finished product, how surprised have you been by the feedback from the finished product in front of the fans?
Oh man. I mean, I'm always, I don't think I'll ever be desensitized to people coming up and giving me compliments, whether it's on the internet or like in person. It means the world to me, man. It means a lot that someone would take the time to just come out, to come up with something they don't know and say their music means something. So it's always shocking, even if it was a handful of people. But it really means a lot that we've been as receptive to folks as we are. And it means the world. I'm trying to do something that is, this is just what I like to do. I don't have any ulterior motive. I just want to make music and share music with people that are like-minded. And I think there is a huge portion of this country that's disenfranchised with contemporary country radio. And I know most of them. I am one of them, so I'm a fan of music. So I'm just trying to make music that maybe represents more salt of the earth people here.
Now, you talked about writing on Music Row, and then you talk about writing for yourself. I mean, how much different is a write whenever you're focusing Music Row, or if you're just focusing more authentically? I mean, is there a huge difference, maybe theoretically?
Well, I've written for other people, with other people, and there's still utility in co-writes and all that, and that format, and it's great. I've gotten to work with some great writers. Every write's different. Sometimes you have an intention. Sometimes you're writing with someone with a publishing deal, so they're just trying to almost fill a quota of having songs to pitch. So it depends. But I've noticed, like, the project I'm set to release here in October, that's just songs I like that the industry doesn't want to touch unless someone's going to foot the bill, essentially. So it's going out on a limb for sure. I realized, like, writing with other publishing companies, after a while, I can do the radio thing if they want me to, but that's just not what I want to do. And that's not my sound. So if I want to put out music that means anything to me, I've got to wear the artist hat and foot the bill for everything. So, which is again why, like, if someone wants to, the fact that I have any semblance of a business team here helping me means a lot, because we don't have that mainstream money behind us or anything. So, we're kind of doing it DIY, but really trying to reach out to people that like this music. And we're lucky. There's a strong niche for this. People want to hear good music, I guess, or traditional music. I'll say. I won't say my music good or bad, but yeah.
Now, is there a difference with the reception of your performance, say, in Nashville as opposed to Texas or back home on the farm? I mean, where do you get the best feedback?
I'd say Montana, but back in Montana, man, the locals there are the kindest people ever. And it's amazing. You have these kind of communities out west where people, it's like, 2 counties over. Oh yeah. So-and-so, he's a writer, man. And like the whole local area supports him. So local sport's always the most endearing, but that's not to say there isn't support elsewhere. In Nashville, there's so many people. There's a huge community for traditional music in Nashville. And when people critique Nashville, they and I'm guilty of this too, they really are talking about Music Row. They're not talking about, they just must not know, because there is the most amazing community of musicians and people in this town, man. I mean, they're just fans of the industry and the history of this town, and that's why they live here and work here, So Texas is great. There's a great consumable audience there. So yeah, I don't have terribly a favorite, but it is good when you play the one cowboy bar and in hours radius, several hours radius in Montana, and people come out in droves. That's a good feeling.
That is a good feeling. Now, tell us, as you approach the release of the album, what concerns you the most before release day comes to you?
Oh, well, I guess this might be a more obvious one, but everything going on with COVID right now and restrictions and what to do and what we're allowed to do, what not allowed to do, and just I'd say the political climate never feels good when you're trying to do something that's music's supposed to be unifying. You need community. You're as an artist at the whim of the populace. Like, you want to make fans and want to be around people. So it doesn't feel good that people don't want to be together right now. That doesn't feel good, no matter what your stance is on stuff. Yeah, other than that, sonically, I hope we picked the right songs and did the right thing, because every dollar really counts when you're kind of, when you're starting. So, there's a lot of things you could think back on, like, did we make sure we did the right thing there? Yeah, I'd say just making sure we made a product that make people happy. That's it, that people want to listen to.
Now, you talked about the history of country music and how important that is to you as well. I mean, how did you develop that love for the history of country music? I mean, how hard was it for you to do that delving and spend that time to really understand where it came from?
Yeah, I'm a fan of music, and I'm a fan of history, so it's easy to kind of tie those together. I think country music is a form of of culture. It really is, and it's speaking of all forms, whether it's Western swing or bluegrass or old time. Or I put them under that umbrella, and I think it's important that music not only sounds good and holds a good message, but is culturally relevant. That kind of identifies us as who we are as people, and that's important, and whether directly or indirectly. And so that's just maybe my stance on what music's supposed to be. So country music is the inevitable form of music that I'm a student of, rather. So I listen to a lot of music. I love records. I love all that stuff, and I like music that fits a landscape or a lifestyle or a geographical location or a certain subculture in American history. So I think we lack that a lot these days, and it's important as a country. We don't want to lose that.
Now, how hard this last year has a year and a half? How has the writing been? How has the inspiration been? Has it still been just as good, or maybe has your emphasis kind of shifted? I use that word shift.
I'd say my writing is a silver lining of the past year. The record I'm putting out here, I actually recorded last fall. Came back to Nashville, but since then I've been working all winter in Montana and all throughout the summer and everything. So it's good to not view myself as a writer, as a musician almost when I'm writing. It's just almost I'm speaking about what I see in front of me, instead of sometimes when you're insulated with the music industry, it's hard to write songs that other people outside of music can understand. You're writing about Music City, or you're writing about the struggles of being a songwriter. And man, it's sometimes like I've taken that hat off to a degree for a while, as the lockdowns happen, and I work with cattle and horses back there, and it's just kind of like a good reflective thing to do, and to humble yourself. And I don't think any artist should be disengaged from average life too much, because it becomes detached from reality. So I enjoy it. It keeps me sane. It's my sustainable formula, I'd say. Having a creative outlet and then having some form of physical outlet that way keeps me balanced as a man.
There you go. Now, again, the new single, Roll the Dice. Sterling, I want to make sure and let folks know not only where to find more info about the single, but about the upcoming album, upcoming dates, all of that, social media wise as well. What's the best place to keep up?
Yeah, find me on Instagram or Facebook, and follow along on Spotify. That's where we're most active on the music side, and social media, Instagram and Facebook are where you'll find me.
All right. Well, Sterling, it's been great to have the chance to visit with you, Dave, brother.
Yes, sir. You too. I appreciate it.
I hope you have a continued great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll catch up whenever you catch back into Middle America.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll be down your way at the end of September trying to do some radio stuff before our album release there in early October. And so maybe I'll be poking my head in there and seeing you guys.
When you're carefully selecting items at the grocery store, do you ever think, I'll buy this? It'll sit in my fridge for a couple of weeks and then I'll throw it away. Well, that's what happens to almost a fifth of stuff we buy. According to a new study, every year the average American spends $1,493 on groceries that they never eat, before ultimately tossing them in the garbage. They got that number by determining that we waste 18.2% of the groceries we purchase, and on average, we spend $8,231 at the store every year. The most commonly wasted foods are fruits and vegetables, since they go bad the fastest. Dairy products are next, followed by grains, proteins, and snack foods. 76% of people say they feel guilty about it because it's a waste of money, and yet 46% admit to buying and tossing the same items every month, thinking that they'll eventually get around to eating it. Now, some tips for avoiding this include shopping alone, not shopping while hungry, and sticking to a grocery list. You might know her as the TLC Long Island medium. We've got Theresa Caputo on the line with us today. And first off, Theresa, thank you so much for carving some time out.
Oh my God, thank you for sharing me with your listeners.
And Theresa, I know as things are opening back up, I know you've got to be excited. You started the Theresa Caputo, the Experience Live. And Theresa, tell us, how did that get started for you? And what's it like getting back out there live in front of a live guest audience again?
Well, it is amazing that we're getting back to a new normal, where we're back in theaters and arenas and being able to do live shows again. The only difference that there is now is that I'm wearing a face covering, and what people don't realize, I'm in a different city every day, so I not only have to protect my crew, but also everyone else in the audience, because I do not stay on that stage, and I did not want to compromise my show. So I come out on the stage, I give a little quick speech on how I communicate with the souls of the departed, and then once Spirit starts communicating with me, I am off that stage, down in the crowd, right in front of you, delivering your messages from your departed loved ones.
And Theresa, how do you mentally and emotionally prepare for the long journey? I mean, this is a long, drawn-out tour, and I know you guys are making a stop in Enid in October. And for you, how do you prepare yourself each week for the travels?
Well, you know what, it isn't easy. You know, I'll be living on a tour bus for 9 weeks. But I love what I do, and I say this all the time. I was born this way. So for me, what I do is so out of the ordinary, but it is so normal for me. And you just adapt, you know, because I know every city that I go to, people are going to be changed in a positive way. They're going to have their faith renewed, whether it be in themselves and their life, because even if we haven't lost someone, we suffer and mourn every day of our life. And what the experience does is it gives us that faith and hope to continue to go on in a positive way.
And for you, Theresa, what are maybe some of the biggest misconceptions that you hear the viewers, the guests that are at the shows after the show? What are maybe some of the misconceptions that are able to open up in their minds?
Well, first of all, I think the biggest misconception is that people think that I predict things, telling people what to do with their lives, and that is the farthest thing from what I do. I think people think that I read their body language, their physical appearance, and honestly, Cameron, I don't even know how this works. It just happens. But people say it all the time after attending one of my live shows. They'll say, look, I had no idea what to expect when I went to that show. I personally did not get read, but what I witnessed was absolutely life-changing. And then they'll even go on to say, and then I realized that there were other people that needed to hear from their loved ones more than I did.
And Theresa, when did you know that I know you said this has been a lifelong gift for you, or a calling, if you will. When did you know that you had something special that you could help others with as well?
That wasn't until I was almost 30. And I struggled with my gift for a long time. See, growing up, I remember seeing the souls of the departed since I'm 4. And I would say to my mom, I don't feel right. I feel different than everyone else. I don't feel like I belong here. And no one ever really made a big deal about the things that I would just nonchalantly say. And I am a practicing Catholic. And I always say, even though they don't agree with what I do, they take my money every week. But that's a different show. So it took me many years to incorporate my gift with my faith once I found out that I had this ability not only to connect with my own departed loved ones, and that's what I want everyone to know coming to the show also. I want you to know that all those little things that go on around you that you think that are odd or weird or simply might just be a coincidence or remind you of your departed loved ones, know that that is them. Know that that is a little hello from heaven, from them letting you know that they're with you at that exact moment, because that soul bond can never and will never be broken.
And Theresa, this last year and a half, how have maybe the requests, the questions, the feedback, how has that changed that you've noticed over the last couple of years?
I just think, especially now with COVID, a lot of people are struggling with the loss of a loved one or just a loss in life, of not being able to say goodbye or not knowing what had happened to their departed loved ones. And maybe even struggling with that they had to lay them to rest in a way that they didn't want to, but they had no choice. And, you know, I find that it's no different, because Spirit has talked about these things for many years, that what we do with their physical body is for us that are left behind. That once their soul leaves the physical body, they're relieved of every and any disability and or ailment. They don't take it with them on the other side.
That's cool. Now, the upcoming shows for you, what was it like getting back on the stage after an extended period being away from the stage and the live show?
Honestly, it was very emotional. I mean, because we didn't know when live entertainment was going to come back. And, you know, for me during the pandemic, the silver lining was, you know, I started a podcast because then I realized that I could do readings over Zoom and connect people all over the world. And then back in February, I started doing live shows outdoors, socially distanced, where everyone purchased their own pod. And it was such an amazing feeling just to get out there and connect with people and give people that little mustard seed of hope, and knowing that everything was going to be okay and that we were going to get through this.
That's right. And again, the Theresa Caputo, the Experience Live. Theresa, I want to make sure and let folks know where they can find more information about not only the dates, but ticketing and more information as well.
Always just go to my website at theresacaputo.com, and so you can purchase tickets and find out anything else that's upcoming.
That's good stuff. Well, Theresa, again, looking forward to the show coming up to Enid, October 23rd. Be sure and go to our website and pick up tickets. And Theresa, congratulations on the show so far, and look forward to seeing you in Enid.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Have a great day.
Now, this poll confused us because most people think that this summer sucked, but we also want more of it. A new survey of 1,500 Americans found 80% of us had a, quote, bummer summer, but 48% also wish there was a way to extend it for another 2 weeks. There's actually almost a month of summer left, by the way. Now, here are a few more random stats from the survey. Number 1, 27% said they'd rather have a root canal than relive the past summer. 37% would rather move in with their parents, and 9% would rather feel seasick for 3 months straight. I mean, was watching Netflix in July really that bad? Number 2, the states where people were most likely to say they had a terrible summer are South Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, Missouri, and Oklahoma. And number 3, here's the weirdest questions they asked. What did summer of 2021 taste like? 21% said fruity. 18% said it tasted like boredom. 15% said bitter. 11% said salty. Another 11% said spicy. And 10% said boozy. Our next guest on the show, and friend of the show as well, acclaimed singer and songwriter, also a member of the the Songwriters Hall of Fame. We're visiting with Kent Blazy today. And first off, Kent, always good to see you, sir.
Same here. I like acclaimed. I don't know if I've ever been called acclaimed before, but I'll claim it.
There you go. Somebody got to claim it. If I figure might as well.
That's right. Might as well be me. How you doing?
I am well, and it's always good to see you, and I'm excited because I spent the last hour before we came on, like I mentioned to you, going through the new album, me and my guitar. And tell us, Kent, when did you first get the idea for this? Is this all music that's new in COVID era, or just kind of rehashing some?
It's pretty much new. I think the only old one is The Future Ain't What It Used to Be, which is a really old Garth Brooks, Kent Blazy song. And he kept playing it on his show. And he would only play the first verse and the chorus. So people were bugging him and people were bugging me. Well, how's the rest of the song go? And so when he was going to do his new record, I said, are you going to put that on there so people can hear how it goes? And he said, well, the record's called Fun and it's not really a fun song. So why don't you put it on a record? So that's what I ended up doing. And, you just got to go with what he says to do. It's worked pretty good so far.
He has a pretty good formula, doesn't he?
Yeah, he really does. So it was fun to put that on there. And the cool thing about that song was Garth back then would play new songs that he'd written with writers for other writers. And so he played that song for Kim Williams, who I didn't know at the time. And Kim hated that song. And he said, well, there's one line in that song that could be a new title on another song. And so Garth called me up and he said, hey, I've been writing with this kid, Kim Williams, and I played him our song and he hates it. But would you write with him? And I said, well, he hates my song. Yeah, sure, I'll write with him. So we got together and we wrote a title off of that song and ended up writing Cold Shoulder that same day that was on a Garth record. And then we had 4 number ones together and wrote a bunch of songs with a lot of other artists. So sometimes you got to write with somebody who hates your songs.
What's it like coming into that room that day? Did you have a little bit of an edge about you walking in?
I really don't think I did. But the interesting thing was they came to my house. And so I had never met Kim. And so Garth's not the one who's usually on time, but Kim Williams was always prompt. And Garth had not told me that Kim had been burned over 90% of his body. And so when I answered the door, I was kind of in shock. He had been through so much. And but Kim was the kind of guy that 10 minutes later, you didn't even think about it. He was just such a fun-loving, powerful being that it was like, okay, let's write songs. And we did. And so that was pretty cool.
Now, I know we talked about the Hall of Fame, being a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. What was that whenever you were first announced to be a part of that? What was your personal reaction to that?
Well, I was pretty stunned, but it was funny because, Garth is such a prankster. And so he had a couple people from the Nashville Songwriters Association on a Zoom, and his pretense was that he was going to be doing this thing for Billboard, and he wanted me to put a group together of songwriters who had written songs for him to help do this show. And so then he gave me the date, and it's about half the time he gives me the date for something, I've got something already planned, and so I said, I can't do it that day. I'm going to be out of town. And so he stopped and he said, well, I got to tell you, that's all BS. The real thing is, you're being inducted to the Country Music Hall or Songwriter Hall of Fame. So I was kind of in shock. I had to get my brain reoriented to what he was doing, but I think he was more emotional about it than I was, and he started crying and I kind of started crying, and I'm like, you tricked me again, but in a good way.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the new album. It's 12 tracks, and it wraps up. I was listening to this one. I think this is the one I listened to first. I listened kind of in reverse order. The times they are a-changing, the Bob Dylan track. Tell us, what was it about that one that stuck out for you to be included this time around?
Well, the only other song that I've ever done that was a cover was In My Life by the Beatles. And that was 2 or 3 records ago. And so when I was doing this record, we were right kind of in the middle of everything that was going on with January 6th and, the Capitol being invaded or whatever you want to call it. And I'm listening to this Dylan song, and it's 60 years old, and it's still as relevant today as it was back then. And I thought, I've got to put that on there. Dylan's been the biggest influence on my life as far as a songwriter. And it's just how wonderful to have a song 60 years old that's still as true as it was when it was written. And so that went on there. I thought it was a good closing song.
And the times, they are a changing, that's for sure.
Always. And I had a song on a record a few years ago called Footsteps of Dylan, where I was kind of thanking him for what he'd done. And the one line I put in there, he sang the times they are changing. He's still right. It's that kind of thing. And he's 80 years old and just had a #1 record. So God bless him.
That's right. Now, what is it about Dylan's writing that really appealed to you and so many others? I know that so many have been influenced by Dylan. And what was it about? Is it the process, or is it just the mentality of it, if you will?
Well, I've studied a lot of stuff of what he's written. I've watched so many documentaries on him. I think it was, as much as everything else, his evolution from being a folk singer to being a rock star to being a folk guy again to being whatever he wanted to be. And I kind of grew up in a period where you look at the Beatles from 64 to how they evolved in 68 or 69. And back then, the artists had a freedom to do what they wanted to do. Nobody was saying, well, you got to be like so-and-so, or you got to cut your hair different, or they just let them be what, nobody told Jim Morrison, you need to sound more like Jimi Hendrix, And so to me, that was the biggest inspiration on him, on how he kept reinventing himself and still reinvents himself, and is still relevant today as he was when he first started.
Now, what's the biggest difference in the songwriting process as opposed to now as when you started? I mean, is there a different mentality when you come into a songwrite?
Well, for a while I fell into that, but now I don't really have any preconceived notions on where a song's going to go. I really don't fit into what Music Row is anymore. So I just write what I choose to write, what feels good to me, what I'm experiencing, what my friends are experiencing. And, back then, when I first came to Nashville, you could write about people dying or people getting divorced or whatever. These days, you can't have people being married or people getting divorced, or, there's like a dumbing down of what you can write about. And to me, country music was always about the working man. And you look at what Tom T. Hall, who passed away this week, wrote, they were real life stories about real people, and they weren't always pretty, but they were true and honest. And that's what I aim to do in my songwriting, is just be true and honest on what I'm going through or what I see my friends going through, and share it with other people who are probably going through the same thing, because music's universal.
That's right. And speaking of music being universal, I love the song Song Man. I think that kind of goes right along with that as well. And give our listeners a little taste of the story behind Song Man. I know you wrote this one with Corey.
Right. I had this idea, and I think it even came from Corey emailing somebody, and the last thing he said was something about a song man. And I thought, that's a great title. Why didn't I ever think of that? And so I started working on it and kind of had some stuff going. And when he came in, he kind of added some of his favorite songs, but I wanted it to be a thank you to all the songwriters along the way that influenced me and kept me going. And I felt really good when we got it done, that it's saying thank you to so many people that helped me get to where I am.
And the times we live in, unfortunately, we're not seeing a lot of appreciation. It doesn't seem, or maybe respect for those that kind of paved the way for us as well. And this is an opportunity for you to do that as well. And is there a particular track on this album that is your favorite, or do you just love them all like your kids?
It's kind of like picking out your kid that you like. I think one of them that really means a lot to me is Just Another Old Man. And it's a true story about a neighbor that I had. And just you talk about people being unacknowledged. Well, it's that way in the music business, but in America and society these days, it's like old people don't matter anymore. And it doesn't matter what they did. It's just what's relevant now. And it's that way I was talking to somebody last night about Dan Fogelberg and how great he was. And he's kind of a hidden gem that nobody knows anything about. But I don't see some of the young writers that I work with these days really exploring what came before. It's more like just what matters now is what's going on now. And I grew up where I would check the names of who played on the records and who wrote the songs. And it was all a big thing to me to find out, well, where did they get their inspiration from? Who influenced Eric Clapton to play like he played? And you could go back and you could find stuff out, and it was a little difficult. And now you just go to iTunes and you type in something and you get the song and you don't know who wrote it. You just know the artist, and it's just a different world. And so I think people look at music different than they did back then. The Beatles and people like that in England talked about they would ride on a bus for 3 hours to hear Little Richard's 45 of Tutti Frutti that somebody had, and they would study it for hours, and they didn't take it for granted. Everything was special. Everything was new and exciting. And now I think we're just bombarded with having every choice we want, and it dilutes the impact of what music really is.
And I know you mentioned about not necessarily being in the fit for Music Row today, and it's ever evolving. Country music, the genre is growing. It's got all kinds of different subgenres as well. And is that a good thing for there to be so open, or does it make it a little tricky to navigate those waters?
Well, it just depends what you're aiming for with what you're writing. And you got to know the criteria of what you're aiming for if you're trying to get something on the radio, or you're trying to write for what Music Row's looking for. And to me, I like the freedom of being able to write whatever I choose to write. And I have the outlet to put out records and write whatever I want to write. And that freedom, I've seen Corey struggle with trying to be relevant on what's going on with Music Row. And I think he was a big reason why I thought, I'm just going to start writing what I write. And if I like it, hopefully somebody else will.
Something to be said about that. And the new album, Me and My Guitar, what's it like whenever you put something out? And we mentioned this is the second album during COVID, but to get the feedback from the others after it's released as well.
Well, it's pretty cool just to see how different people like different songs that's on the record, and how what they're going through and what I was going through when I wrote it, or what I saw somebody going through, just fits where their life is right now, and how it's helped them get through something, or look at things in a different way, or make them smile, make them laugh. And that's, to me, what music's always been about, touching people and reaching them, whether you make them laugh or cry or feel something they've never felt before, be grateful for what they've got. And so that's my target. And that's why I do what I do.
And the album title is Me and My Guitar, and the single as well. Tell us what your thought was with the write on Me and My Guitar.
Well, I just started, like when I was writing the song about Dylan, I just went back to where I was as a kid. And so when I got this idea for the title of the album, I thought, that guitar's taken me from when it was the first guitar I had was what you would call a POS. That's all I'll say about that, where the strings were so high off the neck and, my fingers did bleed. And so as you move along, you hopefully get better guitars, but no matter what guitar I'm playing, it's taken me to where I am today. And so that's kind of what the whole song is about, and maybe an inspiration for everybody who's sitting in their bedroom thinking, man, maybe I could do this for a living. Maybe I could be a songwriter. Maybe I could be a country star or rock star or whatever, and let them know that it's possible.
As far as a songwriter, I know a lot of folks ask you insights about songwriting, inspiration, how to get started. What do you think is the biggest misconception folks have about being a songwriter?
That it's real easy. I get a lot of people who've written their first song and, they want me to critique it and, get it to people and all that. And I try not to listen to anybody's songs because you open yourself up to lawsuits, unfortunately. It's a different world than it was 40 years ago, but I always loved the Eagles documentary where Glenn Frey was working with Bob Seger and brought him some songs that he'd written when he was first starting out. And Bob said, these are all right, but go write 100 more and then come back and see me. And I think that's what it is. You get so excited about anything you've written. I mean, I still do, whether it's good, bad, or whatever. It's your creation. It's your baby. But it's one of those things where you really have to put in the time and effort to develop that talent like any other thing that somebody's doing. It's the 10,000 hour thing right. Or more. And still there's no guarantee that you've got what it takes. So you have to approach it as a fun thing, a thing you love to do, and anything else that happens after that is just gravy if something good turns out of it.
That's right. Now, the album, Me and My Guitar, Kent, I want to make sure and let our listeners know where they can find the album, where they can find more info about, I know you got some appearances coming up and social media and all that. Where's the best place to keep up with everything?
The best place, my website, they can reach me through there, kentblazy.com, but also it's on iTunes, it's on Amazon, it's on Spotify, unfortunately, but, it's available just about anywhere. And if somebody wants a hard copy of it, CD Baby is the place to go to. And CD Baby will they have different areas that you can go look at that will explain what the record is and give them a taste of what every song is. And it's really a valuable place to go find out what the record is. And it gets my comments on why I created what I created and how things turned out. So I'm a big fan of CD Baby.
That's cool. Now, Kent, how has putting 2 albums out during COVID, how has that changed the landscape moving forward for you?
Well, it's just fired me up to create more. And I've been working on some new ones. And I had a lot of people comment the authentic record that John Party's guys played on was a little more rockin'. And of course, I came from rock and roll before I was right. in country, and I get my greatest love is plugging in an electric guitar and playing loud, So I've been kind of focusing, maybe aiming more towards that on the next record and bringing more of that to the forefront rather than being the country thing, and not necessarily leaving that out, but just having more fun getting in with a band and really letting it rip.
That's really cool. Well, we look forward to finding out more about that as well. And again, Me and My Guitar, check it out. And you can visit him online at kentblazy.com. And Kent, it is always great to visit with you, sir. I appreciate you carving some time out for me again and look forward to catching up soon.
Same here, anytime. Thank you for being you and being a friend of songwriters. We need more of them every day. Have a great day.
Well, thanks again for joining us for this 128th episode in Season 2 of Good Questions with Cameron Dole. If you ever have a comment, question, anything else you'd like to know, you can hit me up on the contact page at gqwithcam.com. You can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook at GQ with Cam. If you'd like to help out in the funding for this podcast, you can visit the merch store where we've got hoodies, shirts, tumblers, mugs, stickers, and more. That's gqwithcam.com/shop. If you have a special guest idea, email me gqwithcam@gmail.com. Again, thanks to our good friend Brandon Allen for coming up with our theme music. We're going to let him play us out and hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday.